Welcome back and good morning to you good people. It's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Maker Spar, where we are bringing you and creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. And today we have one of those leaders. He is multifaceted in a number of different ways. And for those of you who have grown up enjoying pro wrestling, you will be a fan. In addition to, he is a businessman, business development coordinator for Trick or Treat Studios. So we have a fascinating story to get into his life story, and we are pleased to have him today. He is Brawlin Bo Cooper. Rude, crude, and tattooed, and a veteran of Southern California, independent pro wrestler who has 26 years experience. Bo built a reputation as the punk rock powerhouse and hardcore specialist. At 6'2", 385 pounds, trained under Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson, and then with the School of Hard Knocks. Also, some of my favorites, was in the ring with the likes of Jimmy Snuka, for some of you who go way back, which is when Superfly Snuka was one of my cats who I just enjoyed. He also was in the ring with the Hunky Tonk Man, Young Bucks, and he's known for his raw strike fist first style, often described as a bar fighting type brawler. This is Brawlin Bo Cooper. Brother Bo, I can't say how much I've been looking forward to speaking with you and having you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us today, brother.
Hey, Seth Garu, thank you so much for having me, man. It's been a pleasure coming. I know the first day I met you, me and you vibed so well, and I thought to myself, wow, I'd love to be a part of your show here. So it's a blessing to be a part, man. I really appreciate you.
It is absolutely our true pleasure. Your vibe and energy and meeting your lovely family has just been one of the highlights of my birthday month. This is my birthday month, so having you on is one of those special things, and I can't say enough about it. So, Brawlin Bo, tell us your origin story. Where do you hail from, and how did you get started? What led you
I'm
up
from
to
Southern California, born and raised. I was born in Beverly Hills, California, not the Richie type, but I was just born there in Cedar Sinai. And then I grew up in the San Fernando Valley on and off. My mother and my grandmother raised me. At a very young age, I started watching pro wrestling, and I fell in love with it. I don't know why. It was one of those things where I wanted to be a pro wrestler. And excuse me. And I would always watch it. I always told my mom, hey, I want to go to the live shows. I want to, be a part of the action. And she used to take me down to the LA Sports Arena at a very young age. And I would get there early, and I would always see the wrestlers that would walk in. And one of the days that I got there, I stopped one of the wrestlers and I said, hey, I want to be a wrestler just like you when I grow up. And he stopped and took the time out of his, busy schedule. And he said, hey, if you're serious, here's a phone number to call. And he gave it to my mother. And my mom kept that number. We called it, and it was Bill Anderson at the time out in San Bernardino at the School of Hard Knocks. I was at the time 13, and he said, you're a little too young. Keep the number. Call me back in a year or so. We'll see what we can do. Well, I was listening to a publication. Back then, they had like the public syndicate cable shows, for like all sorts of topics. And there was a guy named Shadow Man, and he was talking about pro wrestling, and he would talk about, Southern California dealings with wrestlers, etc. And he dropped the name School of Hard Knocks again. And I heard that, and I was like, wow, that's the same school. So I called again. I said, hey, I want to come down. I want to see if, you guys are willing to train me, because it's what I want to do in life. So I went down to the school. It was 2 hours away in San Bernardino, California. At the time, I was living in Simi, which I still currently reside in. And I went there, and I was blown away. It was a really small building. There were a bunch of wrestlers in there wrestling. And I said, hey, this is something that I really want to do. And they kind of like looked at me like, well, you're a 14-year-old kid. You really want to get in there with us? Excuse me. And I said, yeah, I do. And my mom, she signed a waiver, paid the money, and I started training at 14 years old at the age of 14. And that was 1994. I trained for about 2.5 years before I had my first professional match. And then, I never stopped. I love it, and I fell in love with it. And lots of bumps and bruises along the way, but it was something that I knew right then and there, once I took my first bump in the ring, that, I'm never going back. So
you were 16, Bo. You were 16 for your first entry in the ring?
Yes. So I was 14. I was late in 94 when I started training. I had my first match, if my math is correct, in May 4th of 1997. So almost 3 years. Yeah. So 2.5 years, I trained hard. And I don't know if it was because I was the drizzling, poops, and my manager started I don't know if you're ready yet, kid, but I think he did that on purpose because he may have saw something in me where he wanted to make sure that I was not only mature enough, to be in the ring and to entertain a crowd, emotionally and physically, but also mentally. He wanted to see if I was tough enough to last throughout the proper training for so long, because I was in there with guys that were actually like men pro wrestlers, and I was just a kid. Even though I was a big kid, they tested me. They wanted to see if I was in there for real and to see if I was going to hang with them and come back each week, which I did. So I think I gained a little bit of their respect after like being there for a year, getting my butt, kicked. But other than that, it was one of those things where I was getting frustrated at the end because I was like, I want to be out there now. I'm ready. And my trainer said, well, we'll let you know when you're ready. So on May 4th of 97, I had my first wrestling match at the San Bernardino Boys and Girls Club in front of about 500 people. But I had such a baby face and I had long blonde hair at the time. They put me under a mask. So I think that was another reason why they wanted to protect me as well, because if I did go out there and I screwed up under my real name, that looked bad on the school. You know what I mean? So I think they wanted to give me a little bit of an experience lesson going under the hood for a while and just wrestling. I wrestled under the mask for about 6-7 months, and then the hood came off. By that time, at least I was confident, on what I was doing, as a professional wrestler. And then I started developing my own character as Brawlin Bo Cooper.
So Brawlin Bo, you didn't start out in your first fight at the 16-year-old as the 16-year-old. What was your name then?
When I debuted, it was called the Hangman. It was like a Western hang gimmick. Yeah, I came out with like a duster, cowboy boots, executioner, basically. Executioner style. Yeah, it was like a Western. Yeah. We both have a cough, man. I don't know what's going around. It's in the air,
No, I think so. Usually I would have my tea with me, and I forgot to bring that this time. But so at 16 years old, and you're in the ring with some of these cats, and they began to respect you. And so what gave you the insight into Brawlin Bo? What was it? Roadhouse, the movie back then? I know that was back then. Or what gave you that inspiration?
Well, I'll tell you the name, how it became evolved. In Lancaster, California, we were doing a TV taping of shows that at Cape House Studios. They had a little studio there. They would film different types of TV shows. And my mom actually got hooked up with them business related wise. And they got my trainers, which run Empire Wrestling Federation, involved. And they started doing monthly wrestling shows taped for TV for their local studio. And I said, well, I live out here at the time in the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale area. And I said, well, I'm the hometown kid. I want to be known as the AV Brawler. And then they said, well, okay, that's nice and dandy, but what are you going to do when we start, going other places and traveling, and you're a part of the show and you want to be called, something else? I said, well, what if we just called myself Brawlin Bo Cooper? And they liked it. And then it stuck from there. So I never really changed many gimmicks. I mean, I've had a couple things here and there, depending on if the promotion wanted a different character and the money was right, I would change it for that one time or, a special deal. But 99% of my career out of 26 years, I've been known as Brawlin Bo Cooper.
The character development, what happens? Do you get guided along by some of the promoters, or how is that more so as you, Bo Cooper, you start to fit in, okay, I'm going to take the character this direction? Who makes that decision?
A little bit of both. I mean, obviously you want to listen to your trainers and guidance of what they think that, you should do out there. If you're doing something wrong, they'll correct you and say, hey, instead of interacting with the crowd this way, maybe try it this way a little bit. But some of the best wrestlers in the world are basically themselves with the volume turned way up. Like for instance,
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's from Texas. He drinks beer. He goes out there and kicks butt, but it's him, with the volume turned way high up to get the crowd going. Just kind of like me, I'm a big tattooed guy, hardcore style. When I go out there, I want the crowd to really take advantage of feeling my energy, because they came to pay to see us. So from the moment, I would go through that crowd, I'd be loud, I'd be intense. I'd let them know, hey, I'm either going to be a bad guy that night or a good guy, heel or face for the pro wrestling term. It's one of those things. Repeat the term. What is it? Heel or what? So for a good guy in the pro wrestling industry, you're called a baby face. And then in the wrestling side, for a bad guy, you're called a heel, which is funny, because if you watch old school black and white movies, you can hear them once in a while quote heel, like, "Oh, you're such a heel." But you don't hear the term babyface ever. At least I haven't yet, but I don't know where that came from. Like,
No.
heel goes way back from the Hollywood era and movies. You can hear that.
Yeah, it does heal, and it makes good sense. And I think one of the things we used to be fascinated with, my brothers and I, we would all be sitting in front of the television watching Jimmy Superfly Snuka and you cats, and we would hear the term heel, and we didn't know what heel meant right away as we were younger, but we knew that was the bad guy. That was the bad guy.
Right. And now it's more popular than ever. Most wrestling fans, if you're smart on the industry, you'll hear that term, constantly, heel or babyface. So
heel or babyface. And so once you won your first championship fight, how did that come to play?
My first championship belt and my match that I ever won, I want to say I was wrestling for a company in Lompoc, California, for my good friend Billy Blade, who's still running wrestling all over the United States. Actually, he does the Micromania show, but we'll get into that later. But it was a hardcore championship because, like I said, from the get-go, I always like to take the style, and interpret it into my matches where, you don't go out there and just brawl. I want to show the crowd that I can actually perform an actual wrestling match, but I like to always interpret it, a chair shot here and there, or maybe some sort of table spot or something hardcore to get the crowd, going, wow, that was pretty crazy. I've never seen something like that. Because back then in like 2001, that you weren't seeing much of the hardcore style unless you watched ECW, which I was a huge fan of, Extreme Championship Wrestling. But to get to the question that you asked, my first championship was a hardcore match, and I won the championship from the promotion. I'm trying to think of the promotion's name. It's been so long, but yeah, I won the hardcore title that night. It was my first time I ever bled.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was fun. And that got my adrenaline going. And then I just fell in love with it even more, And then I just said, well, I want to keep going and winning title after title for each promotion that I wrestled for. I'll get back to the name. I can't think of the name of the promotion, but it was so long ago.
What's always been fascinating? I had the privilege of meeting a couple of other cats who were in wrestling, but I don't think people really understand the intensity that you guys do train. You train pretty hardcore, and it's not even just for the characters and so forth, but a good number of you guys as athletes get some hardcore training in there for the feats that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about your training process?
Yeah, I mean, you would go in there and you would do forward rolls for a good 20 minutes to the point where you're spinning and throwing up, because you want to get your body into such good conditioning to where you're being tossed around, you're being thrown around, you're taking falls on your back, you're taking falls on your stomach. So training wise, you would do a lot of cardio, running the ropes for a good 5 minutes back and forth just to make sure that your wind is up. You would do a lot of repetitive spots over and over in the ring to make sure that you're working correctly, safely with your timing. I mean, the training of pro wrestling, people think is super easy. And I would love for anyone that thinks it's a, simple task to get in a ring, to get in there and take one fall without ever being trained and see how much, pain they experience through their whole body. Because it's rough. Pro wrestling is one of the hardest sports in the world. You can talk to guys that have done MMA. You can talk to guys that have done football, et cetera, that have transitioned into pro wrestling and made it their careers. And they'll tell you straight to their, to your face that pro wrestling rings are not soft. The ropes hurt when you hit them. When you're obviously you're not going out there and trying to kill your opponent, for real, even though you're trying to make it look that way. But, it's one of those things where you have to make it to where the crowd is experiencing the violence that they paid to see without trying to really hurt the guy. And it's tough. Training is tough more than anything. I mean, you got to get in there and really, really bust your hump to make sure that, your trainers respect you. You get that sweat going, and you really got to have the cardiovascular, to make sure that you can last in there too.
Yeah, and it is pretty precise. I remember back in the day, this was late 90s, early 2000s too. But going to Reseda, they had a Reseda roller rink. Mm-hmm. They used to have wrestling matches there. You remember that?
It was I was never a part of it, but I remember it being there. Yes.
Yeah. And that's where we got to know some of those cats and see some of their training routines. And I'm glad you had mentioned how intense the training can be, because a number of people just see, they're They don't need to do too much. They're just doing stunts, but it is an intense process, and that's one of the things I admired when I was younger. Now, tell us about some of the you had mentioned earlier, the wrestling circles that you've traveled in.
Yeah, I mean, there was when I was growing up, when I first broke in, there wasn't too many independent wrestling promotions in Southern California and up north. If you were a part of a Southern California promotion at the time, you were a big dog because there wasn't a lot of competition. So I wrestled for the Empire Wrestling Federation. That was my trainer's promotion, mainly out of San Bernardino, Inland Empire area. But they would take the shows all over, to Arizona, Las Vegas, all the way up north, San Francisco area. And they would run shows anywhere from like a American Legion Hall to, huge high schools that, drew crowds that the kids wanted to see wrestling, to parks. I mean, anywhere that there was a good venue that would draw a crowd, the Empire Wrestling Federation did a really good job. I stuck with them for a long time just because I felt home. But then I knew that, in order for me to get more experience, I needed to, spread my wings a little bit and start wrestling other guys rather than the same dudes I've been, wrestling with growing up. So I branched out and I started wrestling up north for a company called All Pro Wrestling. They're very well known out there. They were like the main Northern California promotion at the time, and Empire was like the main Southern California promotion. So I kind of broke into there, worked my way up the ranks a little bit, won a title for the All Pro Wrestling CC Championship. And then I just started traveling. I went to Arizona and I started wrestling for a promotion, Rowdy Wrestling, out there. That's where I wrestled. My first big name was Honky Tonk Man. Yeah, that's when I knew. I was like, okay, now I'm really starting to feel this business, because I was in with one of my heroes growing up, watching him be the greatest Intercontinental Champion on WWF TV. So me and him did a lot of shows together. He liked me, he trusted me, because I think that he knew that there was a lot of guys with egos, and he let me just say what I wanted to get in. But I knew that the crowd came to see him, not me. So I let him just do whatever he wanted, and I just went with it, and I listened to him, and he respected me, and he would recommend me to other promotions that he would be a part of. So then I got to wrestle on a show with Jimmy Snuka, because he recommended me to go there and wrestle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy
Here's
Snuka.
one of my cats. Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you, though, one of the most painful moves I ever took was Jimmy Snuka's splash. But he didn't mean to hurt me, but he did. He comes down full force and he extends his body off the top rope. And when he lands on you, he told me, "Brother, sit up." And I sat up, but you feel it 150, times just crashing on your chest. But no, working with those two legends really opened my eyes. I started getting real confident afterwards, saying, hey, if I can last with two guys that have been on WWF TV for years that are legends, I can do this with anyone. So then I started going to, promotions all across, the United States, and I just wanted to get my name out there. And I think it worked. I started seeing myself in the magazines under rankings, and I just started getting my character over as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, I won multiple titles throughout my career, for different promotions, tag team, a couple tag team championships with a guy named Jason King. But it's one of those things where you got to rank up in each promotion you go to, because if you just stay level at one promotion, you're only going to have the fans that see you every weekend or every month or whatever know who you are. You got to get out there and get your name out there. So that's what I was trying to do. It's just like music, you go sing and play at all these awesome venues, but it's one of those situations where if the crowd doesn't know who you are across the United States or wherever, you're not going to make it big.
How do you move up in the rankings? Is it by each time you win a fight, or is it just about the amount of times you're promoted in a certain area? How does the ranking go?
Well, I think that you got to get your character, developed in each promotion you go to, because the fans don't know who you are. If you have a great match and the promoter says, hey, the crowd was really, involved in your match, you had good charisma out there, I think you did really well with our promotion. Hopefully they'll invite you back to the next show, for another payday as well. And also just start getting your story that you're trying to build with another wrestler to keep going higher and higher. I mean, it's up to the promoter, number one, to say, hey, we're going to book you or not book you. But if you have a good professional attitude and you work really hard in the ring and you see the crowd adapt to you in there, I think the promoter should invite you back. I mean, I always got invited back. So that's I guess that's a testimony of my in-ring work as well as my outside professionalism, when it comes to meeting a promoter and dealing with promoters.
And then how does the pay structure work?
Very little. No. Independent pro wrestling, man. I'll say it like this. There's not going to be a living off of it unless you have a name for yourself that has either been on TV for a long time with a company like WWF, WCW, ECW. Or there are guys that do make a living nowadays that travel constantly, but it's very, very hard to keep an independent pro wrestling bank account to a level where you can pay your bills, because it doesn't pay much, man. I mean, I was making anywhere from $50 a match to 150, depending on where I was. I think my biggest paycheck was like 500 at one time, which I was flabbergasted by. But yeah, you can't make any real good money unless you're actually signed to a company nowadays.
And how do you get signed to a company? Is it that as your ranking increases, that's how you get signed? And since you're becoming more popular, then ECW or a number of those say, "Hey, let's pick up Bo." Is that how it works?
Yeah, you get your name out there, and then obviously, like for instance, back in like 2006, I had a WWE tryout match for not the actual company, but I had one of their agents come to an event that I was wrestling at to take a look at myself along with two other wrestlers, because he got word that, hey, these guys are doing really well. We're getting, their names in our ears. We're getting, somehow they got word that, hey, these guys are actually pretty good, and we should get a look at them. So I remember when Bruce Pritchard came to Bakersfield at a show that I was at, and he was a WWF talent scout at the time. He documented my match, gave me some pointers afterwards, and then also two other matches. And then I kept in contact with him as best as I could for him being on the road. And he just said, hey, keep up with us and we'll see where it goes. Wrestling, you're like wrestling. It's a needle in a haystack. These guys, there's thousands of wrestlers trying to make it to the top. It takes a certain amount of work for you to get to the top. I think at the time, even though I was dedicated to the craft, I wasn't ready to go start traveling the world. And I think that I made some decisions where I could have gotten my body in better shape. I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently a little bit. That could have escalated my career farther. And I just didn't have the mentality, I think, to do that.
And so you felt at that time, I get that. And
I was young, I was only like 26 and I thought I knew everything. And I've already like thought to myself, hey, I'm a veteran. I've done this for 7 years now, 10 years. And I was just not mature enough to know how to handle the proper business side of things. Like I could have, like I said, done my body in better shape. I was always a heavy set guy, but I was trying to eat clean, work out. I had a big body. But it's one of those things where I knew if I really hit the gym hard and I ate better and I didn't drink my beers and I didn't really, go out on the weekends as much as I wanted to, rather than focus on the wrestling, I probably could have made more money in the wrestling business.
That does take its toll as well, as far as being able to sustain a financial income to take care of the bills and so forth. And that's part of that. I definitely get that. And I think a number of people think the allure is so great because it looks fun and you're getting to be physically active, but it does take a great deal to make a good living at it because there's strong competition.
Right. And nowadays, if you go and look at independent wrestling shows, man, Seth, there's thousands of pro wrestling shows that some are good, some are not so good. And there's guys that are wrestling 3 months out of wrestling school that probably aren't ready to be even out there. And it's like I said, 20 years ago, there was only a certain amount of promotions that were legit promotions that I got, the honor to work for, which made me a special elite group. Now there's pro wrestling everywhere. I mean, and there's guys that are, no offense to the smaller guys, because a lot of guys are small nowadays, but you look at a guy that is 120 pounds, and it's like, okay, well, he can do this cool move, but what is he really going to bring to the show as a presence? You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things. You got to have an all around package. You got to have the look, you got to have the presence, you got to have the drive for it, and the want, and you want to stay hungry and just get your name out there. You're your own investment. You got to get your name out there so that the promoters want to bring you in as a draw.
And I think you said it really well. You're your own investment. And so that plays a big role if you're willing to put that investment in yourself a great deal. And then sometimes I think as we travel along, you're also deciding, I would imagine the wrestling field is the same way. This is not the timing for this portion of my career, and you move forward, as it seems you did as well, because you're also a business person. Tell us about your transition into your business, Trick or Treat Studios.
Well, I had two loves in life, man. It was pro wrestling and the horror industry. Ever since I was a kid, I loved watching horror movies. I loved Halloween more than anything in my life. And pro wrestling will always be in my blood. It'll always be a part of me. But, going back to where I have a mortgage, at 40 years old, I have a wife, I have a daughter. I couldn't just stay not so much fantasizing that I'm going to make it big in the pro wrestling industry, because I've done a lot. I got to wrestle a lot of legends. I got to wrestle, on a lot of big crowded venues where, it feels like you're in the stardom spotlight, but the money wasn't there. It wasn't coming in. And that's for a lot of guys. But I knew that I had to make a real big decision on a career-wise choice. And I always was good at sales. I had a couple sales jobs here and there throughout my life. I did the security gigs, bodyguarding, doing bouncing work, doing, doorman work. But once again, that's not a lot of money either. I mean, that's just a couple hundred at most on a weekend. So I thought to myself, well, what can I do to make myself have a career that I actually enjoy waking up to? So I would go to a lot of horror conventions just as a fan. There's a company called Trick or Treat Studios where I bought a lot of my masks from. And I actually became friends with the owner, Chris Zeffro, and the, vice president, Justin Mabry. He's the co-owner as well. And I just told him, I said, hey, if you guys ever need a sales rep, please think of me. I love this business so much. I'll do whatever it takes to have a career in the horror industry. And I just threw it out there. And Chris Zeffro and me became pretty close because he's a wrestling fan as well. And he gave me a call and he said, hey, we have a little bit of an opportunity here opening up for sales. Would you like to be involved? I said, absolutely. The main base of the headquarters is in Santa Cruz, California. So it's about 6 hours away, the office and where we ship out all of our products. I am in Simi Valley, California. So I said, well, do I need to move up there? He goes, we'll make it work. So I work remote from my office, as you can see, all my horror stuff. But it's done really well, man. It's a dream come true to work for one of the biggest, well, it is the biggest horror company in the world. We have an elite amount of product, from masks, action figures, pens, air fresheners, wrapping paper, purses, with over 200 licenses. Yeah, is that your dog? I love it.
Yeah, it's
all good, man. I have dogs too. Trust me. I don't know if you heard my kid crying and banging on the door. So for all you people out there, we're only human. We got dogs and kids. Right. But yeah, Trick or Treat Studios, man. Yeah, Trick or Treat Studios has been a dream come true. I've been with the company 6 years. I work for the wholesale side of things. I open up new accounts, make sure all my clients have their accounts maintained when it comes to new product knowledge. I'm on the phone a lot. I'm on the emails a lot, and just selling the product that comes in. Like I said, we have over 200 licenses for some of the most popular horror movies that have ever been created. Halloween, Friday, Nightmare on Elm Street, Terrifier, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Lost Boys,
Terrifier. Oh my gosh, that was incredible. Terrifier.
Oh yeah, Art the Clown, man. What a brutal series of films that is, huh?
Oh, dude, I tell you, Bo, seriously, and I got turned on to it by a buddy of mine and said, you got to see this, because I'm a horror fan too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it nothing gave me that feeling, except as a kid, I remember watching Trilogy of Terror, which was also this great horror movie. You remember?
The doll.
Bo, yes, you remember.
That actually went for, I think that's the highest, if I'm not mistaken now, I think that the Zuni doll was the highest priced item that ever sold in auction for horror.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think it was like $1 million or something. It was really crazy. I can look it up. Wow. But yeah, Terrifier was one of those is one of the biggest franchise that has ever been created. David Howard Thornton, the guy that plays Art the Clown, his lines at conventions are just wrapped around the building. I mean, people just love that character, and I can see why. He's brutal, he's funny, but he doesn't talk. So it's just, his mime work is just something else.
It's phenomenal.
I got the opportunity and an honor to actually be involved in the Terrifier 3 music video that was done by Ice Nine Kills. I was just an extra in the crowd, but we were there for about 12 hours that day, shooting at a studio out in LA. and Art the Clown was right there, killing people in the crowd. And, I was a part of the music scene, which was awesome. So shout out to Ice Night Kills for having me. That was awesome.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I got it. Like I said, that was it is one of the better franchises in horror. And there's a list of them going down there that I can say that don't do what Terrifier did as far as the horror genre for me.
Of course.
Now I'm curious with your studios and what they're doing with the masks. So they license the masks themselves from explain that process so I can say that correctly.
So forgive me on not knowing too much of the backside of how my bosses sign the contracts, but in a nutshell, we take a franchise, we take a movie or a music, even we have a lot of music related items like Iron Maiden, Misfits, Ghost, anything that has either a mask or some sort of sellable merchandise that we can make. We take the opportunity to sign the license, get the rights to that property, and then we manufacture pretty much 1-to-1 scale, or sometimes even from the actual screen used movie molds. We have a lot of screen used movie molds that we work with that come right out of the actual on screen mask that we have. Like for instance, like here, I'll show you like one. Let me see. So this is this is Halloween. That's straight out. Yeah, that's straight out of the movie mold from Halloween Kills. I mean, that's
dig it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just Michael Myers in a nutshell.
Incredible.
We try to take as much detail as possible and make it to where the horror fans that are buying this can say this is directly identical to what I see on TV and movies.
Okay, and so someone comes to Trick or Treat Studios and they say, we're theming this particular party Halloween Kills, and we just need everything Halloween related of the movie series. Correct?
Well, we would reach out and say, hey, we want to make this part of our own. Can we get the rights, and will you guys work or deal with us? Some sort of commission check, I would assume, is involved, and then we sign the license, we make the product, and then we sell it to retail.
And now there in your office, are there any great stories behind some of those masks that you see there, that we see there in your office?
Well, the warehouse, when you go into the Trick or Treat's warehouse, it's just a huge warehouse full of merchandise. So it doesn't really look too crazy with it because it's all in boxes. But I will tell you, I've heard some stories that some coworkers have said, like they've stayed late and they were alone in the office and lights flicker here and there. And, they hear weird noises in the warehouse and stuff. So, but I mean, that's if you're into that kind of stuff, you believe in
it. Well, there's something to be said about that, brother. I was talking to this other cat. He I used to do a number of the haunted houses during the big haunted houses here in TO and in San Fernando Valley and so forth. And what he used to tell me, he worked in Universal Studios there when they started doing the haunted Halloween Horror Nights, and he was saying they had a number of different stories that when they brought out the masks, and so what he used to say was some of the masks would carry energy with them if you're into that kind of stuff.
No, I totally believe it, and it's one of those things to where, like, I'll tell you a quick story. I have thousands of awesome masks here in my room, in my office, and a bunch of figures, bunch of posters. There are a couple items that I have purchased just because I want them part of my collection that I'm kind of getting weary about. I'm a huge fan of the movie The Exorcist. My wife loves it, but it's one of those things where that's such a powerful movie. And, I have, it's over there. I can show you, but it's actually from the mold of one of the architects that find the Pazuzu head in the ground in the beginning of the movie.
Wow.
I have a replica of that over there. And, I have a 2-year-old daughter now, man. And as much as I love horror and as much as I love the fantasy, parts of it, sometimes I think to myself, is that good energy to have in my home?
Yes.
Because that movie in a nutshell is the most evil, most powerful movie ever made. So, I was always raised as best as I could be in the Christian church with my mom, but my other side of the love for horror is, just knowing that it's fantasy, it's a story, it's, drama, it's a thriller. But having something like that, I always think, into my head, is that proper to have in my home? So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get rid of it, but it cost me a little bit of money. So I'm like thinking to myself, is it worth throwing away or giving to a friend? But yeah, it is one of those things where you think about that energy, like you said.
You definitely have to, and like I said, and maybe not going too deep down that road, but I've heard many a times, having been a horror fan myself, they have talked about the energy that's attracted to or is in some of the movie sets and that kind of thing. And I think there is some credibility to some of that. But Absolutely. As far as stories go, you know, there's some bumps in the night and that sort of thing. And I'd imagine, especially with The Exorcist Pazuzu, that would be whoa.
And I also have the pea soup can from Eileen Dietz, who played Pazuzu. She's a sweet lady, man. I know all these people because of the horror conventions, but she signed it, you know. And I have Linda Blair's figure. She won't sign anything. Linda Blair played, you know, Regan in The Exorcist,
yes.
And she won't sign any quotations from the movie. She only signs "Sweet Dreams," Linda Blair, because I wanted her to say, you know,
interesting.
Hey, yeah, you know. Something pretty demonic from the movie, have her sign my figure, but she won't do it. You know, she's a sweet lady too. She runs the biggest, I think it's the biggest like animal rescue shelter in Southern California.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she's all into like rescuing animals, which is awesome. I love animals, but
for sure. Same here.
Yeah, it's funny, man. You'll meet some of these, you know, I've met them all just from working in the industry and going to conventions as fans. You would think these people, when you meet them, are just, you know, downright gritty and nasty,
creepy and stuff. Yeah,
they're the sweetest. Like Freddy Krueger and Robert Englund, nicest guy you will ever meet, man. And he'll talk.
Oh, you met Robert Englund? You met Robert Englund?
Mm-hmm.
And so what was he like? He's a cool cat.
Well, I jumped in line because it was like a 6-hour wait, and my buddy was getting a big poster signed by him. So I kind of smozzled my way up to hang out with my buddy real quick, and I was just standing there next to him while he got his poster signed. And I just started saying, hey, you know, Robert, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a fan, you know, ever since I was a kid. And he was like, oh, let me see your artwork. Let me see your tattoos. And he started talking to me about artwork and all this. So he actually took a piece of paper and drew me a little Freddy Krueger and gave it to me as an artwork piece. And I was like, oh, this guy's awesome. But yeah, and, you know, there are certain guys that'll, you know, be a little cocky here and there, but 99% of horror celebrities are super, super down to earth and rad. And he was probably the nicest one I've ever met.
Oh, very cool. How about Chucky? The I forget that his name is Charles something. He was the voice of Chucky.
Brad
Dourif. That's who. Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Charles Lee Ray was the Chucky's name.
That's
in the movie. But Brad Dourif. Unfortunately, I have not met Brad. I'd love to have run into him at a convention. He doesn't. I haven't seen him do many conventions. I know he's out there, but I think he might be more East Coast. But yeah, he seems like a really cool guy. I mean, from what I've heard.
I could imagine you have a number of incredible stories from some of the greatest horror movies. Any of them stick out in your mind?
As in for horror movie, like say that again. I'm sorry.
Any stories from some of the conventions with some of the horror movies stick out in your mind?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny one. So I was having a little bit of a conniption fit because we always try to get our hotels in order prior to, you know, waiting too long. Me and my wife, we want to call the hotel like a couple months in advance, book our hotel, make sure everything's taken care of so we can get there and just relax and then go into the convention, either work. Because I used to work at the convention at Trick or Treat Studios booth. But I have a bad back, so standing there for 8 hours a day kind of, you know, is too much on me. So they have another employee do it. But to get to the story, I was standing there, not arguing, but going back and forth with the representative at the Sheraton Hotel at Monsterpalooza, which is a big horror convention. And I was saying, hey, man, we got here at 2:00. Our room's not ready. Can we, you know, what are you going to do for us? And he's like, oh, well, I'm sorry, sir, your check-in's at 4. I was like, oh, man, I was frustrated. And I feel this guy bump into me, and he grabs me by the arm and goes, let's go have a beer, kid. And I look at him, and I'm like, oh, that's Kane Hodder from Friday the 13th, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10. He played all of the Jasons in the later series.
Oh,
so
wow.
I didn't even argue. I just said, okay, Mr. Hodder, let's go. And I said, hey, I'll buy you the beer. And I go, what's the occasion? He goes, well, you seem a little flustered, and it's my birthday. I don't want anyone being upset on my birthday. And me and him just bonded, and we became cool over a couple beers. And, you know, that's like my childhood, you know, hero, Jason, growing up watching all his movies. Now I'm sitting there having a brewski with him, you know, on his dime offer me to come have a beer with him because he saw I was getting frustrated, you know. So he was he's a super cool cat too, man. I'm telling you, if you go to the horror conventions and you get to intermingle with these people, you know, it'll change your life because they're so awesome, you know. Most of them.
And I've heard that. I have a good buddy who does go to all of them. He doesn't miss any. I've been to one. It was some years ago. By the way, can you hear this background noise?
The only thing I've heard. The only background noise I heard was the pup once in a while.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I've heard a couple of different times he would say that when you go to the conventions, that people are actually super duper humble and very approachable. And I think, growing up, when we see our horror villains and our monsters, you definitely expect that the actors who play them would be these kind of creepy or have this really ominous approach when you meet them. But they generally are just sincere people who are just saying, I just did this role. But
100%.
they've had some of the greatest scary stories also. He would tell me that. Some of their experiences. Yeah. And so I always found that interesting. Oh, yeah. And then, so now on the business end of things with you and Trick or Treat Studios, what were some of the valuable lessons you learned as far as making it successful, making a career out of what you do?
I would say for me, getting to know your clientele and realizing that you are there to help them make a dream come true as well, because they're actually paying for my bills by purchasing merchandise to keep our lights on, and without our customers we would be nothing. So I've taken a big pride in getting to not only do a good service and justice when it comes to filling accounts for them and making sure that their store is operating with our merchandise as best as it could, but also getting the fact to actually become friends with these people. I consider probably more than half of my clientele as actual friends now, because I've talked to them for the last 6 years. We've built just shooting the breeze, talking over the phone here and there, but really getting to know these types of customers that we have and finding out what is the best way I can help you to keep your lights on. And that's something that I take a lot of pride in when it comes to helping other people stay open in their stores, because the industry is a little tough right now. This year has been rough, with the tariff situations and
For
all this
sure.
stuff going on. So a lot of people are scared, and a lot of people are having to cut back when it comes to buying a lot, which is scary. But I try to keep.
I was just going to ask you about that. How much has that affected you?
It definitely hasn't helped. I know that the one thing that's good about our company right now is we have a lot of great products that are sitting in our warehouse ready to ship, which means that we will probably be okay when it comes to the fact of having customers throughout the Halloween season be able to call us up and say, hey, here's a huge list of items that I want to get me through the Halloween season, which we can provide. So that'll at least help us and them knowing, because some of the companies that, are pop-up shops or, only run in the months of, August, September, October, aren't going to be getting a lot of their merchandise like they normally would because of the tariffs. So I think our greatest factor is that we have a warehouse full of awesome items ready to go, ready to ship, that's already been there that have not been tariffed.
Wow. And it's very interesting because you hear some of the different ways that the tariffs have been affecting some of the industry, and I would imagine for in a specific industry like yours, it could have some impact. To what extent? That would be the question. So how were you guys finding getting over some of those challenges?
We take it one day at a time. I know that there's a lot of items that we were going to have in high hopes for coming over that were bigger items that we're going to have to cut back on. I don't really know too much when it comes to making decisions on what we're going to do when it comes to like signing new POs, product orders, merchandise to bring in new stuff. Because as of right now, we're still planning on fulfilling a lot of our items that the way it works is in January, we release all of our new products for pre-order, and then people get the chance to pre-order all these items that they see displayed in the catalog or in person at a show. And then they say, okay, hey, we're going to place an order and we're going to get these items, down the road. A lot of the items we're still moving forward with, but some of them have been cut because of the tariffs. I can just say that. I mean, that's just basically all with my knowledge on how that works. That's the big top dogs, decision on how to continuously bring in product when it comes to the tariffs decision. But yeah, it's scary. It's scary, but I think we're going to be okay. I really do.
For sure. So Halloween, it's easy to say that Halloween is probably the busiest time for you guys. But in the store around the year time, are there other peaks and highs as far as your business goes, or that seasons that we're not aware of, just out of curiosity?
Right.
So is June, the summertime, a busier month, or is something along those lines?
The beginning of the year, we get really busy with pre-orders, which is good because it helps us forecast what we're going to have coming in with clientele when it comes to the products that we release in our catalog. So we see the popularity of items and, you know, not so much other items because we get pre-orders. But around this time, you know, March, April, May slows down a little bit. But then after 4th of July, everyone's in the Halloween season. I always make a funny joke. Like once that last firework goes off, it's Halloween time. You know what I mean? It's true though. People get in that Halloween spirit because the stores start releasing things early. People that love the industry of Halloween so much, they get so excited to start counting down the days because it's the next holiday after 4th of July. So that's when our business really starts to increase is around July, after 4th of July.
And just a kind of a different kind of question. I'm curious, do you find there's more a male attracted nature to getting Halloween supplies or a female? Just out of curiosity, I've always wondered about that.
I'll tell you this much, man. I mean, if you go to the conventions nowadays, you'll see 50-50 horror fans. I mean, there's just as many female horror fans nowadays as there is male. I typically have dealt with more male owners when it comes to the business side of things. You know, I talk to a lot of guys more than the women, but I do have a lot of clientele that are women as well that are just as big of fans of horror and Halloween as I am, and which is awesome. I mean, it definitely, I don't think there's any discrimination on women or male when it comes to the love of passion for Halloween and horror.
Okay, now I just was always curious because I've seen in the industry and some of the horror films, you see a large male presence, but it's not to be underestimated. I see a number of women they throw big masks in Halloween.
Oh yeah,
balls and that sort. So I was always curious if there was a noticeable change or a remarkable difference in the genders as far as how your business went.
Well, if you go to like a Comic-Con, you know, you're going to see probably more of a male presence than you would, you know, female, which is, I don't know why. But when it comes to horror, I think there's a lot of awesome women out there that absolutely love the horror industry, and you'll see them around, you know, either in cosplay, dressing up, you know, or just as a fan. You know, I mean, some of the coolest girls I've ever talked to, man. One of my good friends, you know, she owns a tattoo shop. She's a horror model, Rochelle. She's covered from head to toe, all horror tattoos. I mean, it's just awesome, dude.
Wow.
It's rad, dude. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely a good mix of both.
And now I'm curious. You spoke about being a husband and a dad. Does your wife find the horror stuff a little off-putting, or is she a big part of it?
She supports it. You know, she's never been like a huge slasher film horror person, but she likes more like the spooky. She likes The Exorcist. She likes Poltergeist. She likes, which is not a horror film, Hocus Pocus. You know, I love Hocus Pocus as well. It's a Disney film, but
yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
Hocus Pocus rocks. It was a good movie, dude.
The best. I love it. Yeah, man. Every Halloween we watch it. You know. She's more into like the witchy side and the spooky side of things, you know, which is cool. My little girl, I try not to, you know, get her scared, obviously, by watching any horror movies that are too over the top, but she has done pretty well when it comes to being around the monsters. We try to make it, you know, a good thing. Like, oh, there's your friend, the monster, you know, and she'll be like, hi. Which is funny because like we take her to Monsterpalooza and she'll wear her horror shirts. Everyone loves her. She doesn't have a problem, you know, seeing the monsters walking around, but we took her to Disneyland. She freaked out on Pirates of the Caribbean. So I don't know.
You never know, right?
I got to choose my battles, I
guess. That's it. Now I'm curious, between your two careers, because both were illustrious, do you have a preference? And I don't know if it's fair necessarily to make that determination, but between wrestling, pro wrestling, and it being in the horror genre, do you have a specific affinity for one or the other?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like sitting at a desk in an air conditioning room, you know, making a nice living, rather than being in a sweat box full of, you know, a bunch of, you know, overgrown men wearing Speedos for, you know, a hot dog and a handshake, you know. But, you know, they're both my passions. But at this point in my life, after being broken down and hurt, you know, my L4, L5 discs are gone. I need to have hip replacement surgery. I've had multiple concussions. I'd rather sit down.
So
I don't know.
I guess I could. No, doesn't sound weird. It's just, you know, when you think about it, I guess it does make sense being in an air conditioning place as compared to. having your hip dislocated.
Oh, for sure.
A bunch of guys with Speedos. Yeah.
Well, a lot of my friends, and they ask me like, man, you really killed your body out there, landing in thumbtacks and chairs and all the blood that you shed and, all those broken bones. And was it worth it? And, I look back at it now and I'm 45 and I am really hurt from pro wrestling. I mean, my body is tremendously bad off. Partially because I'm overweight. I think that has a lot to play, but the damage is definitely done from all the years of abuse of being in the ring and chasing a dream that never really paid off when it comes to, like I said, the money wise. But I don't regret doing it because it's something that I truly, truly loved. It's a passion. It will always be a hobby of mine, to be involved in wrestling somehow. I don't wrestle. I actually had my last match last September with my good friend Mario Banks. He's a wrestler and we've trained together and wrestled all over. I actually helped train him. But I did it full circle because I got to wrestle at a horror convention, Creepy Con IE. They had Lucha Libre set up and I knew the promoter that was putting it on. And I said to him, hey man, Kevin, you got to help me out here. It was Mass Republic. So shout out to Mass Republic Wrestling. And I said, you're having a horror themed wrestling, or you're having horror. You're having wrestling at a horror convention. That's right up my alley. I said, you got to do me a favor. Let me have my last match there. He said, you got it, whatever you want. So I got to wrestle in front of about like 250, 300 people, all horror fans. Close friends were there as well, but it was full circle because it actually happened in the Inland Empire. So it was like my first wrestling match in the Inland Empire. I had my last wrestling match in the Inland Empire. So I'll still be doing things here and there. My buddy Billy Blade runs the Micromania wrestling shows all across the nation. He has a venue at the Nerd Bar in Las Vegas, and it's called Mini Square Garden. So it's like, where the
Mini Square Garden, dig it.
I don't want to say the word because I don't want to get canceled, but you know what? All the people that say it, even the little people, they call themselves midgets. And they do. I mean, it's midget wrestling, man. And I don't want to offend anyone out there because, listen, I respect all people, but it's one of those things where the midget wrestling, if you put that on the marquee, it draws the biggest houses in professional wrestling besides WWE right now. I mean, Billy travels all around the world, literally all around the world, and he draws anywhere from like 2,000 people to 5,000 people.
I've seen him.
So I get to host it when they come out to Southern California. They usually do it at the Canyon Club in Agora Hills, or if they do it, at the Ventura Music Hall. I just get out there. I get the crowd hyped. I get the crowd excited. And it's fun. I'm going to be involved in wrestling always till the day I die, probably. But I just can't do it in ring anymore. Which I miss.
You answered that. And that was going to be a question I was going to ask you. Did you see yourself somehow involved in wrestling the rest of your life in whatever capacity? And I can get that because it still is a passion, correct?
Well, yeah. I'm never going to not want to be around it. It just depends on what level of physicality is involved nowadays.
Yeah. And then just on the Mini Square Garden, we understand we live in a politically correct world, but I think it's still okay in most circles that say, okay, this is a form of entertainment as well, where it's not, you're not crucified for saying it. But I think sometimes it just brings a snicker to people because it's actually very entertaining and fun to watch. And I've seen it a couple of times. Yeah. And so in closing, if you had to say valuable lessons you would give anyone who's going into not only pro wrestling business, but as an entrepreneur, as a leader yourself, but going into the Halloween and the sales business, what would that piece of advice be?
Always have a backup plan. Always have some sort of career you can fall back on or an education you can fall back on. I myself know that I'll get by if, God forbid, something ever happened, because I do have a professional way of handling business for sales. So there's always sales jobs out there. But, I don't want to not ever, say that it could happen, but within any industry, things could happen. So I would say professional wrestling and in my career of Trick or Treat Studios, you got to have some sort of backup plan, in life, because my wrestling career no longer, like I said, I don't wrestle anymore. I'll still be around and involved, but the money I've definitely dwindled down compared to when I was in ring, just doing little things here and there nowadays. I don't see myself ever going. Hopefully, Trick or Treat Studios will be my career till the day I die. We're doing really well. We're the number one leader when it comes to high quality props, masks, figures, pins, purses, etc. And I think as long as the horror industry stays afloat and fans continue to love our products, we're going to be around. And I'm proud to be a part of that. But as far as advice goes, I would just say have a backup plan. Do your best as a person every morning. Wake up positive. Love what you do, or try to at least love what you do, because there's a lot less fortunate people out there that don't even have a job at all. So
Absolutely.
not just with me, but for any industry, if you are down on your job or you don't want to get up in the morning, think about the people that are struggling more than you will ever struggle. Think about the people that are searching for jobs for the last year and can't find anything, and they're about to lose their home. Be thankful, be positive, each morning that you wake up and say, hey, this is what God gave me. This is what we have today as a task to get through the day, and be thankful for it. That's what I try to do.
Brawlin, Bo, we couldn't have ended at a better way. And I love that you said that. And especially because when we met, it was all about positivity and brotherhood. And so those are the words that I do want our Makers Bar. We're trying to create 1 million leaders. And that's exactly the piece of advice to give them and to end that note on. And I often say for our audience, Lovolution is the revolution that we all want. So let's go out there and create a revolution of love.
Absolutely.
Bo, where else can they get more information about you and Trick or Treat Studios? Where else would you like people to reach out for more information?
Yeah. On my Instagram, if you guys want to give me a follow, it's just at Brawlin Bo, BRAWLIN, just like the name, Bo 13. I'm always cool to chat with fans or new friends. I'm very sociable, so you guys are always welcome to give me a follow, and I'll follow you right back. As far as the Trick or Treat Studios, you can go to www.trickortreatstudios.com, or you can follow them on Instagram. It's trick_or_treat_studios. You'll know them right away because we have about 216,000 followers on there right now. Always growing. That's the main corporate account for Trick or Treat Studios on the Instagram. But yeah, I mean, I just want to say, man, I've known you for only a couple weeks now, and when I met you, I felt your vibe right away. Not only as an entrepreneur, as an artist, but I also felt a connection to you, and I appreciate you, man, being a new friend of mine, and for having me come on Makers Bar. Because it's definitely a real honor and a pleasure to be on this show, man.
The feeling is mutual, brother. I just appreciated what you radiated and your beautiful family. And
Thanks.
I just already consider you a dear brother for life. I just can't even tell you. I hope our watchers and viewers can see, if you can see this cat in real life, what he radiates is so much positivity and warmth. And you can sometimes look at a book and you think that the book is all that there is outside. But what the book sometimes radiates and projects is this picture of honor, positivity, and warmth and love. This cat does that. And I just got to say, Brother Bo, it's just truly an honor. And I'm looking forward to us having some more fun together, cat.
Absolutely, man. Beers on me next time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Brawlin Bo Cooper, ladies and gentlemen, in the Makers Bar audience. And we thank you for joining us today. Always wanting to bring you new insight to leadership, always creating new 1 million leaders. And this is one of those cats there, rich in the field of experience of wrestling and in sales. His advice is always have a backup plan. So from myself and Brawlin Bo, your dude, Seth Guru Baxter and Makers Bar, we wish you the best of the day. Make the most of it. We're sending you with love and peace. Have a good day, people. Bo, talk to you soon, good brother.
Cheers.
Cheers, brother.